another shortage. Queues stretch across filling stations, businesses shut their doors earlier than usual, transport fares double overnight, families are forced to spend more just to get to work, school or the market. For millions of Nigerians, this scene has become painfully familiar, but here is the part that makes no sense. Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer. Every day, hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude oil leave its shores for refineries around the world. Yet for decades, the country has imported much of the petrol its own people depend on. Think about that for a second. One of the richest oil producing nations in Africa buying back the very products it should have been making itself. How does that happen? How does a country earn billions from crude oil exports while struggling to keep petrol flowing at home? Was it corruption, bad planning, politics, or did Nigeria fall into an economic trap that became almost impossible to escape? Because this isn't just a story about war, it's the story of billions of dollars, broken promises, and one decision after another that changed the future of Africa's biggest economy. This is the story of why Nigeria still impulse fuel after spending billions on oil. To understand the mystery, we have to go back nearly 70 years in 1956. Of crude oil were discovered in Oloibiri in what is now Bayelsa State. At the time, few people could have predicted what that discovery would mean. When Nigeria gained independence in 1960, oil was still a growing industry. But over the next decade, everything changed. Global demand for oil exploded. Then in 1973, the world was hit by an oil crisis. Prices soared. For countries that produce oil, it was like winning an economic lottery. Nigeria suddenly found itself earning billions of dollars from crude oil exports. Money flowed into government coffers faster than ever before. There was a growing belief that oil would transform the country forever. New roads were announced, large infrastructure projects were launched, government spending expanded rapidly. Oil quickly became the backbone of Nigeria's economy. Today, crude oil still accounts for a large share of the country's export earnings and remains a major source of government's revenue. On the surface, Nigeria looked like a country destined for prosperity. But beneath the celebration, a dangerous dependence was quietly taking shape. As oil money poured in, other sectors of the economy, especially agriculture and manufacturing, received less attention. The country became increasingly reliant on one commodity whose price was determined by events far beyond its borders. Then came another decision, a decision that should have solved Nigeria's fuel problem once and for all. The government decided to build refineries. If Nigeria could produce crude oil, surely it could refine it too. It seemed like the perfect plan, but that plan would eventually become one of the country's biggest economic disappointments. On paper, Nigeria had everything it needed: crude oil, demand. Government are meant to refine its own fuel. In the 1960s, Nigeria started building state-owned refineries. The first opened in Port Harcourt. As the country's economy expanded, more followed. Another refinery was added in Port Harcourt, then Warri, then Kaduna. Together, the four refineries had a combined installed capacity of about 445,000 barrels of crude oil per day. It was enough to supply a significant share of Nigerians' fuel needs. For a time, they did. Petrol flowed, diesel powered factories, kerosene light homes. Then plan seemed to be working, but all refineries are among the most complex industrial facilities in the world. They don't just need operators, they need constant maintenance. Pipes wear out, valves fail, equipment corrodes, control systems become outdated. Around the world, refineries shut down periodically for planned maintenance before small problems become major failures. Nigeria's refineries were no different. They required regular investments and disciplined management. Instead, maintenance became inconsistent, projects were delayed, equipment aged, and each year the refineries produced less than the year before. By the 1990s and 2000s, breakdowns had become increasingly common. Some units sat idle for long periods, others operated far below their installed capacity. Then came the government's solution: repair them. Administration after administration announced rehabilitation projects. Billions of naira and later billions of dollars were committed over the years to restore the refineries. Each announcement came with optimism. Officials pronounced production would soon return. Nigeria will refine its own fuel again. The queues will disappear. The imports will end. But somehow, the same story kept repeating. Repairs were completed, celebrations followed, then output fell again. More contracts were awarded, more money was approved, more promises were made, yet the country remained independent on imported fuel. For many Nigerians, it became a frustrating cycle. Every few years, another announcement, another budget, another rehabilitation plan, but little seemed changed at the pump. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If the government kept spending billions to fix the refineries, why didn't they stay fixed? Was it poor maintenance, weak oversight, changing politics, or was there something much bigger happening behind the scene? Because while these refineries struggled, another industry was quietly becoming stronger. An industry that would eventually handle billions of dollars every year: the business of importing fuel. By the early 2000s, Nigeria had become one of the world's strongest oil economies. Every morning, oil tankers left the Niger Delta carrying crude oil worth billions of dollars. Days later, different ships arrived at Nigeria ports carrying petrol refined thousands of kilometers away. The same oil, leaving as crude, returning as fuel. It wasn't supposed to work this way. The country's refineries were built to process Nigeria's crude, but as their output declined, the gap had to be filled out somehow. The answer was imports. At first, it was meant to be temporary, just enough to cover the shortfall until the refineries were fully restored. But the temporary solution slowly became the permanent system. Year after year, Nigeria imported fuel, and with every shipment, the cost grew. But importing petrol wasn't as simple as buying fuel from another country. Someone had to pay the difference between what it costs to import fuel and what Nigerians paid at the pump. That's where fuel subsidies came in. Here is a simple way to understand it. Imagine it costs 1,000 naira to import and deliver 1 liter of petrol. If the government wants motorists to pay only 700 naira, someone must cover the remaining 300 naira. For decades, that someone was the Nigerian government. The idea was straightforward: keep the fuel affordable, protect families from rising transport costs, reduce pressure on food prices, support businesses that relied on generators because electricity supply was often unreliable. For many Nigerians, cheaper fuel wasn't a luxury, it was a lifeline. But there was a problem. As global oil prices rose and as the naira weakened against major currencies, the cost of maintaining the subsidy kept increasing. What started as financial support gradually became one of the government's largest recurring expenses. Over the years, successive administrations spent trillions naira on petrol subsidies. Supporters argued those payments protected ordinary Nigerians. Critics argued the system had become inefficient, discouraged investment in local refinery, and created opportunities for abuse that were investigated by government agencies and lawmakers over the years. The debates divided economists, politicians, businesses, and ordinary citizens. But almost everyone agreed on one point: the system wasn't built to last forever, because every naira spent keeping petrol prices artificially low was a naira that couldn't be spent elsewhere: on hospitals, on schools, on roads, on power infrastructures. And there was another hidden cost: fuel imports had to be paid for largely in foreign currency. That increased demand for US dollars and added pressure to Nigeria's foreign exchange markets. When dollars became scarce, importers struggled. When shipments were delayed, fuel queues returned. When global prices increased, the government's financial burden grew even heavier. What Nigerians experienced at filling stations was often the final link in a chain of global oil prices, exchange rates, shipping schedules, domestic policy, and refinery capacity. The fuel crisis wasn't caused by a single failure. It was the result of many systems pulling against each other at the same time. By now, Nigeria has spent decades exporting crude oil, importing refined fuel, and paying enormous sums to keep that fuel affordable. The country had reached a crossroads. It could continue relying on the same model or attempt something far more difficult: rebuild its refining industry from the ground up. And that's when one businessman made a promise that many believed was possible: Nigeria could refine its own fuel again. For decades, Nigeria searched for the same answer: fix the refineries, reduce imports, end the fuel crisis. Every government promised it, none fully achieved it. Then something changed. In 2013, Africa's richest businessman, Aliko Dangote, announced a project unlike anything the continent had ever seen: a privately owned refinery capable of processing 650,000 barrels of crude oil every day. It wasn't just another industrial project. It was one of the largest single-train refineries ever built. For years, construction continued. The costs climbed into billions of dollars. Deadlines were missed. Critics questioned whether it would ever be completed. Some called it too ambitious. Others called it impossible. Then, after years of construction, the refinery began operations in phases, gradually bringing different processing units online. For the first time in decades, Nigeria gained significant new domestic refining capacity from a newly built facility. It was a milestone many thought they would never see. Around the same period, another historical decision changed the country's energy landscape. In May 2023, President Bola Tinubu announced the removal of the long-standing petrol subsidy. The decision immediately pushed fuel prices higher. Transport became more expensive. Businesses faced rising costs. Families felt the pressure almost overnight. Supporters argued the reform was necessary because the subsidy had become too expensive to sustain. Critics argued that ordinary Nigerians were carrying the burden of years of policy failures. Both arguments reflected real concerns, but together, these changes mark the biggest shifts in Nigeria's downstream petroleum sector in decades. More domestic refining, less dependence on imported petrol, a market moving towards greater commercial pricing. Yet, challenges remain. Refineries need reliable crude oil suppliers. Pipelines require protection and maintenance. Distribution networks must function efficiently. Politics need to remain predictable enough to encourage long-term investments. One refinery alone cannot solve every problem, but it can change the direction of the journey. Today, Nigeria stands as a turning point. For years, the country exported crude oil and imported much of its petrol. Now, it has an opportunity to refine more of this crude oil at home. Whether that opportunity becomes lasting progress will depend not only on infrastructure but on governance, investment and consistency. Because history has shown that building a refinery is only the beginning. Keeping an entire energy system working year after year is the real challenge, and perhaps that is the lesson hidden inside Nigeria's oil story. The country's greatest resource was never just the crude beneath its soil, it was always the decision made above it. Nigeria's story is bigger than oil. It is a reminder that natural resources alone do not make nations prosperous. Many countries have discovered oil. Few have formed it into lasting development. The difference is really what's underground. The difference is what happens after the discovery. The institutions that are built, the policies that endure, the investments that outlast political. Today, Nigeria has another chance to rewrite its. Whether it succeeds will be judged not by the of barrels it pumps, but by whether future generations ever have to ask the same question again. Why did an oil-rich nation have to import its own fuel? If you enjoy this documentary, subscribe for more stories that uncovers the business, economics, and history behind the headlines, because sometimes the biggest mysteries in the world aren't hidden, they are happening in plain sight.